sharp edges and survival. Imagine a world without metal, without plastic, without even fire to keep you warm. A world where every day began and ended with the struggle for survival, where the smallest edge of stone could mean the difference between life and death. Around 2.6 million years ago, early hominins, our distant ancestors, began shaping the environment in the simplest but most transformative way, by breaking stones. The first tools were not elegant. They were crude flakes chipped from river cobbles, often found near ancient streams or scattered across savanna landscapes. These flakes were sharp enough to slice through animal hide, cut flesh, and scrape bone marrow. For hominins, who lacked the claws or teeth of predators, these simple flakes gave access to calories and nutrients that had previously been locked away inside carcasses left behind by lions and hyenas. Picture this moment. A group of hominins huddled near a half-eaten zebra carcass. The big cats had eaten their fill and wandered away. Without tools, the leftovers would have been almost useless. Thick hide, tough tendons, and bones too hard to crack with bare hands. But with stone flakes, our ancestors could cut through hide, shear off strips of meat, and break bones to extract marrow, one of the richest fat sources in the prehistoric diet. These early meals, supplemented with scavenged plants and fruits, gave crucial energy to fuel larger brains over generations. The stones themselves came in many forms. Volcanic basalt, hard and durable, could produce razor-like flakes. Flint, where available, offered even sharper edges. Quartzite, abundant in many riverbeds, provided a workable alternative. Each material had its quirks, and hominins learned, slowly, perhaps through trial and error, how to strike stones against each other at the right angle to produce usable flakes. Archaeologists call this technology the Oldowan industry, named after Oldoway Gorge in Tanzania, one of the richest sites of early human occupation. But why stones? Couldn't sticks or bones suffice? Certainly, wooden digging sticks and bone fragments were also used, but stones had durability and sharpness unmatched by other materials. A stone flake could remain sharp long after a wooden point splintered. It could be carried, reused, and resharpened. For the first time in human history, there existed an object not naturally formed but deliberately shaped to serve a function. That act, the intentional reshaping of nature, marked the dawn of technology. Daily life for early tool users was not glamorous. Imagine hours spent searching for the right type of stone, testing its breakage, and then carrying it across miles of open savanna. These stones were heavy, sometimes awkward, but they were worth the effort. A single sharp flake could transform a scavenging opportunity into a feast. Over time, groups may have even shared knowledge of where to find the best stone quarries, planting the earliest seeds of human geography. Beyond cutting meat, flakes had many uses. They could scrape hides to soften them for clothing or shelter. They could sharpen wooden sticks into spears or digging tools. They could slice plant fibers for rope. In essence, these first tools expanded the possibilities of human survival in countless small, but significant ways. Each cut, scrape, or strike represented a moment of adaptation in a harsh world. Archaeological sites show us something fascinating. These tools were not randomly scattered, but often clustered, suggesting designated spots where groups gathered to butcher animals or process materials. Some sites even reveal evidence of repeated visits, perhaps across seasons or generations. Imagine the scene: a group returning to the same flat stone by the river, where the rock broke just right, to fashion tools before moving on in their endless search for food and safety. These behaviors hint at something profound: memory and planning. To return to the same quarry or butcher site required remembering its location, anticipating future needs, and teaching others where to go. The making of tools was not just about survival in the moment, but about shaping survival strategies that extended across time. The Oldowan tools also changed social interactions. When a group scavenged together, they needed to share tools and food. A flake might pass from hand to hand, its edge dulling as each individual cut their share. Some may have been better toolmakers than others, sparking the earliest forms of skill recognition. Did those who could nap the best flakes gain status in the group? Did they pass down their methods to younger members? Archaeologists cannot answer these questions with certainty, but the very possibility suggests the beginnings of cultural transmission. There is also the question of how these tools influence the body. Cutting meat reduced the need for enormous jaws and teeth, allowing evolutionary pressures to favor smaller faces and larger brains. Cracking bones for marrow provided fat to support brain growth. Over time, the synergy between tools and biology reshaped what it meant to be human. Technology and anatomy evolved together, each pushing the other forward. Still, life was precarious. A sharp flake did not make hominins apex predators. They were opportunistic, often feeding on leftovers rather than hunting large animals directly. They faced competition from hyenas, lions, and leopards, any of which could, and often did, drive them away from a carcass. To use tools meant to take risks, edging closer to danger for the promise of nutrition. This balance of courage and caution defined early survival. And yet, from these humble flakes emerged the long arc of human ingenuity. Each strike of stone against stone was a small act of defiance against the harshness of the world. Each tool was a bridge between weakness and survival, between hunger and sustenance. Over countless generations, these tools shaped not just what humans ate, but how they thought, cooperated, and imagined the world around them. As you reflect on this first step into technology, consider the weight of a simple stone flake in the hand of a prehistoric human. It was nothing more than a chipped rock, yet it carried within it the power to transform survival, society, and evolution. And it raises a question that echoes even now. When did humans truly become human? Was it with the first word, the first fire, or with the first stone deliberately shaped to cut, learning to shape the world? When we left the story at the end of Section 1, we were standing beside an ancestor holding a sharp flake, the first glimmer of technology. Now we move deeper into this moment in time, not just the making of flakes, but the gradual discovery of how to shape the world itself. For here lies the transition from chance to choice, from opportunistic breakage of stone to intentional design. This was not a sudden revolution, but a process spanning hundreds of thousands of years, during which trial, error, and persistence slowly built the foundation of human ingenuity. From accident to intention, the earliest flakes may have been accidental, stones breaking when struck against each other while cracking nuts or bones. But over time, our ancestors realized that breaking stones could be purposeful. Archaeologists identify this shift in the record. Tools became more standardized, showing patterns not likely produced by chance. Certain angles of strike, called percussion angles, produce predictable flakes, and early humans learned, perhaps through watching and imitating, how to master this process. Think about what this means. Striking one stone against another requires force, but not too much. The angle must be just right. Too steep and the stone shatters uselessly, too shallow and nothing flakes off. To repeat this act successfully requires not only strength, but also patience and memory. Some of the earliest flake cores, stones from which multiple flakes were struck, show evidence of repeated blows, revealing the persistence of the toolmaker. This persistence itself was revolutionary. The ability to try, fail, and try again until the desired result was achieved. We must remember that these were not modern humans, but earlier hominins, species like Homo habilis and later Homo erectus. Their brains were smaller, their bodies less adapted to fine motor control, yet they achieved this remarkable breakthrough. The tools they produced may look primitive to us, but each one was a triumph of observation and persistence, a leap into intentionality that no other animal had fully mastered. The Acheulean leap, hand axes. After hundreds of thousands of years of flake tools, a new form of craftsmanship emerged around 1.7 million years ago, the Acheulean hand axe. This was no mere flake, but a carefully shaped, bifacial tool, meaning both sides were chipped to form a sharp, symmetrical edge. Hand axes came in teardrop or oval shapes, often palm-sized, and were astonishingly versatile. With a hand axe, one could chop wood, butcher large animals, dig for tubers, or even defend against predators. The making of a hand axe required foresight. Instead of simply striking flakes until something sharp appeared, toolmakers now envisioned the final form in their minds and shaped the stone accordingly. This act of mental projection, seeing what is not yet there, marks a profound cognitive shift. It suggests that these hominins were capable of abstract thought, planning, and even aesthetic sense, for many hand axes show symmetry far beyond what was strictly necessary for survival. Archaeologists sometimes find caches of hand axes buried together and used. Were they offerings, practice pieces, or perhaps early displays of craftsmanship, like portfolios of skill? The answers elude us, but the very questions remind us that these tools were more than utilitarian objects. They were symbols of intelligence, creativity, and social value. Daily life with stone tools. To imagine life with these tools, Let us follow a small band of Homo erectus across the African savanna nearly 1.5 million years ago. The morning sun rises, and the group sets out in search of food. One carries a hand axe, another a bundle of digging sticks sharpened with stone flakes. The women and older children fan out, scanning for tubers and roots hidden beneath dry soil. With the hand axe, one adult digs into the earth, prying out starchy roots that provide crucial calories. Later, as vultures circle in the distance, the group approaches a zebra carcass abandoned by lions. The men and women work quickly, slicing meat with flakes, cracking bones for marrow. The children gather smaller bones to gnaw on or use as playthings. Nearby, someone sharpens a stick into a spear, perhaps not for hunting large game, still too dangerous, but for fending off hyenas should they return. In the evening, the tools serve again. Scrapers smooth animal hides, which are draped over shoulders to ward off the chill. Choppers split wood for kindling. Even the simplest tasks are eased by these tools. Without them, survival would be slower, harsher, and far more uncertain. Teaching and transmission. But tools are not born only of hands. They are born of minds. And minds must learn. How did early humans teach toolmaking? Imagine a young child watching an elder strike stone against stone. The child mimics, clumsily at first, breaking stones into useless shards. The elder shows again, perhaps by gesture, perhaps by example. Over time, the child learns the right angle, the right force. In this act of teaching lies the spark of culture, the passing of knowledge not genetically encoded but socially shared. Archaeologists studying modern-day knapping experiments note that the skill is not obvious. Without guidance, it takes many attempts to produce even one sharp flake. This means that early humans must have invested time and patience in teaching the next generation. Such teaching would have strengthened social bonds, created hierarchies of skill, and cemented the idea that knowledge could be preserved across time. In the rhythm of stone striking stone, we hear the earliest echoes of education. Beyond utility, the symbolic dimension. Some hand axes are oversized, too large to be practical. Others are astonishingly symmetrical, more precise than necessary. Why invest such effort? Here we begin to glimpse the possibility that tools also carried symbolic meaning. Perhaps a beautifully crafted hand axe was a sign of strength or skill, a way to attract mates or demonstrate status. Perhaps groups valued not just survival, but also the artistry of shaping stone, the pride of craftsmanship. Consider that modern humans still admire symmetry and design. Could this appreciation stretch back over 1,000,000 years, rooted in the aesthetics of stone tools? Some researchers believe so. If true, then the Acheulean hand axe is not just the first complex tool. It may be the first human artwork. Expansion and migration. As humans spread out of Africa into Eurasia, they carried these tools with them. The same types of hand axes appear from East Africa to the Middle East, India, and even Europe. This suggests that knowledge of tool-making traveled across continents, either carried by migrating groups or rediscovered independently through shared cognitive evolution. To carry tools across such distances required planning. A group moving into new territory needed to remember quarry sites, to stockpile usable stones, to balance the burden of carrying heavy tools against the risks of scarcity. Each decision reflects growing foresight, organization, and cooperation. Stone tools were not just objects but companions on the journey, extensions of the body and the mind. The costs of dependence. Yet tools came with costs. Carrying stones was laborious, making them consume time and energy. Sharp flakes dulled quickly, requiring constant resharpening. A poorly struck hand axe could fracture and injure the maker. Dependence on tools meant dependence on the skills to make them, and those who lacked such skills may have been at a disadvantage. In this way, technology began to shape social dynamics. Who held knowledge, who shared it, and who was left behind. Tools also tied humans more closely to certain landscapes. A fertile valley with good hunting, but no suitable stone might prove less valuable than a barren hill with rich flint deposits. Thus, the search for stone influenced migration, settlement, and territorial boundaries. To live with tools was to live in a world redefined by geology. Cognitive revolutions in stone. Let us pause to consider what all this means for the human mind. Tool-making required. Foresight. Envisioning the final shape before striking. Problem-solving. Adjusting technique after failure. Memory. Recalling good quarry sites and methods. Teaching. Transmitting skills across generations. Symbolism. Perhaps valuing symmetry and artistry. Each of these cognitive traits is foundational to what we call humanity. Without tools, perhaps brains would not have expanded as they did. Without teaching, perhaps culture would not have flourished. Without symbolism, perhaps art would not have dawned. In the chipped edges of stone, we glimpse the chipped edges of thought itself, slowly carving humanity into being. Daily monotony and hidden significance. It is tempting to imagine these early humans only in moments of dramatic discovery, but most of their lives were filled with repetition. Day after day, they chipped stones, scavenged carcasses, dug roots, and carried heavy loads. Progress was slow, almost imperceptible across a single lifetime. And yet, this monotony built resilience, teaching patience and persistence. Even in boredom lay survival. For modern listeners drifting toward sleep, perhaps this is the most calming thought. History is not only made in moments of glory, but also in the endless repetition of small tasks. A million strikes of stone, most forgotten, shaped the foundations of human existence. Boring, yes, but profoundly significant. And so we arrive at a puzzle. Were these tools merely practical aids? Or were they the beginning of something larger? Symbols of identity, markers of culture, even the seeds of art? When a hominin napped a hand axe more symmetrical than necessary, was it for pride, for beauty, or simply for efficiency? We cannot know for certain, but the question lingers. When does a tool cease to be only a tool? And when does it become a reflection of the mind that made it? The social life of stone tools. In the first two sections, we traced the earliest steps of humankind's technological journey, the crude flakes of the Oldowan and the carefully crafted Acheulean hand axes. But to understand stone tools fully, we must see them not only as objects, but also as participants in the social fabric of early humanity. They were not just stones that cut and scraped. They were anchors of cooperation, shapers of relationships, and silent witnesses to the evolution of culture. Tools as shared property. Imagine a small group of Homo erectus clustered around the remains of a wildebeest. The kill was not theirs. It had been taken down by lions, who now lounged at a distance, bellies full. The humans waited, then rushed forward once the lions moved away. With sharp flakes, they sliced through thick hide, distributing the cuts among them. No single person owned the flake. The tool passed from hand to hand, dulling with each use, its edge slowly worn down. Here lies a fascinating truth. Tools were communal. Unlike personal ornaments or weapons of later societies, these early tools had no lasting individuality. They were used, shared, broken, and discarded. In this way, they encouraged collective survival. The act of passing a tool reinforced bonds of trust and cooperation. One person alone could not have survived easily, but together, sharing both food and tools, the group endured. Tools thus became woven into the very idea of community. A group without tools would starve. A person who hoarded tools or refused to share risked weakening the entire band. Early humans learned, perhaps instinctively, that survival meant collective access to these hard-won edges of stone, skilled makers, and social status. But not all hands were equal. Some individuals became skilled at knapping, able to produce sharper, more reliable flakes with fewer wasted blows. Others struggled, producing only crude shards. Slowly, a subtle hierarchy emerged, not of kings or chiefs, but of skill. The toolmaker was valuable. Those who could craft well may have earned more respect, perhaps better positions within the group. Some anthropologists speculate that these early artisans may have been the first humans to hold specialized roles. Even without formal recognition, their abilities meant survival, and survival meant influence. It is not hard to imagine a young apprentice sitting at the side of an elder, watching intently, learning to read the angles of the stone. Each lesson was not just technical, but social, a moment of patience, mentorship, and the transfer of knowledge across generations. In these moments of teaching, human culture deepened, gathering sites and stone memories. Archaeological evidence tells us that many tool-making sites were revisited over and over again. Large accumulations of flakes and cores suggest that groups returned to certain quarries repeatedly, year after year. These places may have held meaning beyond utility. They were landmarks of memory, sites where generations gathered to shape their tools. Picture such a site, a wide plain dotted with river cobbles. The ground is littered with flakes from past visits. Newcomers add their own, layering history upon history. A child walks across the field, picking up a flake struck long before they were born. In this moment, time collapses, The child's hand touches not only a stone but the work of ancestors. Were these sites sacred? We cannot say, but in their repetition, in the shared rhythm of tool-making, they became part of human geography, a kind of early map etched not on paper, but in memory and tradition. Cooperation and division of labor. Stone tools also enabled more complex divisions of labor. Once meat could be cut more efficiently, not everyone had to scavenge at once. Some could guard the group while others worked. Some could carry butchered meat back to camp while others scraped hides. This freed time for social interaction, for childcare, for rest. Consider the ripple effect. If tools increased efficiency, then groups could feed more individuals with the same effort. Larger groups meant stronger defenses, more varied skills, and greater resilience. In this way, a chipped stone influenced not only survival, but also the very structure of society. Tools and gender roles. The question of gender in prehistory is difficult. We often picture men hunting and women gathering, but evidence suggests that tasks were far more fluid. Women likely made and used tools as much as men, particularly for plant processing, hide scraping, and food preparation. Some archaeologists argue that women may have even been innovators in tool making, since their daily work required constant interaction with plants, hides, and fibers. This challenges our stereotypes. The chipped stone flake was not the exclusive property of male hunters, but a universal implement of survival. In every hand, young or old, male or female, it became an extension of human ingenuity, conflict, and defense. While stone tools were primarily for subsistence, they could also be turned toward violence. A sharp flake or a heavy hand axe could easily wound or kill. Did early humans use tools against one another? Evidence is scarce, but isolated fossil skulls show signs of trauma that may have been inflicted by tools. If true, this suggests another layer of social significance: tools as weapons of power and dominance. Even if rare, the possibility of violence would have altered group dynamics. A skilled toolmaker held not only the power to feed, but also the potential to harm. Trust, therefore, was essential. Within the social web of stone, cooperation always balanced uneasily with the risk of conflict. The spread of ideas. The distribution of tool styles across continents raises another profound question. How did ideas spread? Did migrating groups carry their techniques with them, teaching others as they traveled? Or did separate groups discover similar methods independently, guided by shared human cognition? Either way, tools became the first global language. Long before words crossed tongues, the shape of a hand axe spoke across distance. A traveler could recognize in a foreign tool the same logic, the same needs, the same hands shaping stone thousands of miles away. In this way, tools became the first shared culture of humanity, a thread that tied scattered groups into a single species-wide experiment in survival. Tools as memory. Every tool carried memory. A flake held the memory of the quarry where its stone was struck. A hand axe held the memory of the hand that chipped it. When tools were passed down or carried across distance, they carried not just utility, but also the story of their making. Think of a young adult inheriting a hand axe from an elder. Each chip, each scar on the stone reflected years of use. To hold it was to hold the elder's life, their hunts, their lessons. In this way, tools bridge generations, functioning as both objects of survival and vessels of history. The rhythm of life. Daily life in the age of stone tools was shaped by rhythm. The rhythmic strike of stone on stone, the rhythmic scraping of hide, the rhythmic cracking of bones for marrow. These sounds would have echoed through camps and valleys, a constant backdrop to existence. For the modern listener, drifting toward sleep, perhaps this is the most lulling aspect of history, the endless repetition of small, rhythmic acts. Nothing rushed, nothing sudden, just the steady cadence of survival. These rhythms, boring as they may seem, were the heartbeat of early humanity. The long view. By the time Homo sapiens emerged around 300,000 years ago, stone tools had been in use for over 2 million years. Think of that span, generations upon generations, each striking stones, each repeating the same motions. Empires rise and fall in centuries, but stone tools endured across millennia, unchanged in essence. This longevity is itself a testament to their importance. They were not replaced because they did not need to be. They worked, and they worked well. For early humans, they were as indispensable as fire or water. And yet, as we consider the social life of these tools, we face an unresolved mystery. Were they merely objects of necessity, or did they already begin to embody meaning? Did our ancestors see them only as extensions of the hand, or also as extensions of identity, of memory, of belonging? We can never know for certain, but in their silent persistence, these stones whisper a question that reaches us even now. Were the first tools the birth of culture itself, or merely its prelude? Reflections on stone and the birth of humanity. For 3 sections we have walked alongside our distant ancestors, watching as they chipped, scraped, and carried their stone tools across savannas, river valleys, and caves. We have seen how flakes and hand axes shaped not only survival, but also cooperation, teaching, and memory. Now, in this final section of Story 1, we step back to reflect on what these tools meant in the grand sweep of history, and how a chipped piece of stone could ultimately reshape the destiny of an entire species. The weight of longevity. Stone tools endured for millions of years. Imagine that span of time, so vast it defies comprehension. While modern technology shifts in decades, stone tools remained humanity's constant companion for thousands upon thousands of generations. The Oldowan industry persisted for nearly 1 million years. The Acheulean hand axe tradition lasted for over 1.5 million. This endurance reveals something profound. These tools were not temporary experiments, but long-term foundations. To live in the shadow of stone tools was to live in continuity. A child born in Africa 1.5 million years ago, and another born 500,000 years later, would have recognized the same tools, the same methods, the same sounds of stone against stone. This continuity gave stability, an unbroken thread across deep time, the expansion of the human mind. But tools were not static, even if they endured. Their creation and use reshaped the human mind. Cognitive scientists argue that the act of making tools required a form of mental time travel, the ability to imagine an object not yet created, to plan actions toward that goal, and to hold in memory both the past and the future. This mental capacity spilled over into other areas of life. If one could imagine the form of a hand axe before it existed, one could also imagine the path of a hunt before it began, or the movement of animals across seasons. The very act of tool-making trained the mind to project, anticipate, and strategize. In this sense, stone tools were not only instruments of survival, they were teachers. They taught patience, foresight, and abstraction. They shaped the architecture of the human brain itself, nudging evolution toward intelligence, language, and imagination. From hands to language. One of the enduring questions of anthropology is how language emerged. While we cannot pinpoint the exact moment, many scholars suggest that the communication required for tool-making laid the groundwork. Teaching another how to strike at the right angle, or pointing toward a quarry, demanded gestures, sounds, and perhaps proto-words. Stone tools thus served as both subject and catalyst for communication. They created a need to share knowledge, and in meeting that need, early humans may have taken the first steps toward spoken language. The rhythm of napping could even have provided a model for rhythm in speech, the measured strikes echoing the measured syllables of future words. The emotional dimension. It is tempting to see tools as purely practical, but human beings, even in their earliest forms, carried emotions. Imagine the pride of a young apprentice who finally struck a perfect flake after weeks of clumsy failures. Imagine the frustration of a hunter whose tool shattered at a crucial moment. Imagine the grief of a family who buried an elder with their hand axe, placing in the grave both memory and meaning. Some archaeological sites suggest precisely this: tools buried with the dead. If true, it means that humans already saw their tools as more than objects. They were part of the self, companions in life, and worthy of being carried into death. The line between tool and identity blurred, and with it, the first traces of human culture emerged, the first steps toward art. Among the millions of hand axes found, a few stand out for their beauty. One, discovered at Saint-Achille in France, is perfectly symmetrical, its edges curved with elegant precision. Another, found in Africa, was shaped into a near heart-like form. These are not coincidences. They show that toolmakers cared not only for utility, but also for form. This attention to symmetry may represent the birth of aesthetics, the first stirrings of art. If so, then the leap from hand axe to cave painting was not as vast as it seems. Both are acts of shaping the world not only for function, but also for expression. Both reveal a mind that finds satisfaction in order, pattern, and beauty, a web of dependence. By the time of Homo sapiens, stone tools had woven themselves so deeply into human life that survival without them was nearly unthinkable. To lack tools was to lack the means to hunt effectively, to process food, to clothe oneself, and to build shelter. Tools defined what it meant to be human. And yet, this dependence also carried vulnerability. Groups without access to good stones suffered disadvantages. A migration into barren lands with poor raw materials could spell hardship. Thus, humans became tied not only to landscapes of food, but also to landscapes of stone. The Earth's geology dictated patterns of movement, settlement, and trade. Even in prehistory, resources shaped history. Global connections before civilization. As humans migrated across continents, they carried their tools with them. Acheulean hand axes appear in Africa, the Middle East, India, and Europe, forming a kind of prehistoric signature across the globe. Long before writing, agriculture, or cities, there was already a shared human tradition, the tradition of shaping stone. This shared tradition bound together distant groups, even if they never met. A hand axe found in Kenya and another found in Spain tell the same story, the same logic, the same needs, the same human hands against stone. In this sense, stone tools were the first global culture, uniting humanity in practice long before borders or nations existed. The slow dawn of change. And yet, change did come. Around 300,000 years ago, new technologies emerged: blades, points, and more specialized tools. These innovations hinted at the growing complexity of human thought and the diversification of survival strategies. Eventually, bone and antler joined stone, and later, metals would transform everything. But the foundation remained the same, the shaping of nature to serve human need. The stone flake may seem humble beside the bronze sword or the iron plow, but without it, none of these later inventions would have been possible. The first flake opened the door, and humanity walked through it step by slow, patient step. The boring significance. At first glance, the story of stone tools may seem dull. What could be more monotonous than millions of years of striking stones together? But therein lies the quiet power of history. The boring details often matter most. Empires collapse, kings are forgotten, but the chipped stones remain, stubborn and enduring, telling the story of persistence. This is the heart of boring history. The recognition that survival was not shaped only by great battles or dramatic moments, but by endless small acts repeated across countless lives. The striking of a stone, boring though it may seem, is the bedrock of civilization itself. And so, we end where we began, with a chipped stone in the hand of an ancestor. To them, it was a tool. To us, it is a symbol, the first chapter in the long story of human ingenuity. From that simple edge sprang agriculture, architecture, language, art, and eventually the world we know today. But a question remains unresolved. When we look at these tools, are we seeing only objects of survival, or are we seeing the first reflections of humanity itself? Was it the stone that made us human, or the human that made the stone? That question, boring and profound, lingers still.